the Royal Blue podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
Hello and welcome to the Royal Blue podcast. It's the Friday show and I am your host, Ian Croll. Joining me on today's show to talk all things Everton, we have Joe Thomas. Joe, how are things? All good?
Yeah, not too bad. Cheers, Ian.
Good. As you can see from those watching on YouTube, Joe is not in the Royal Blue studio today. We are recording via video link. It was the only way that we were able to bring you this podcast, but we wanted to make sure that we were able to do so, and we will be back in the Royal Blue studio on Monday to react to the Fulham game. So today's agenda, it's the Fulham preview show, so that obviously means stuff like injury latest, starting lineup discussion and predictions, the usual stuff as we look ahead to tomorrow's 5:30 kickoff under the lights at Goodison Park. We are not live today, so sorry about that, but as always, get your questions and get your comments in, and of course, we always appreciate the interaction and feedback. Final bit of housekeeping. As usual, please give this video a thumbs up and drop us a like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, show us your support. Joe, we will obviously come on to Fulham. You were at Sean Dyche's press conference yesterday. Marco Silva has done his pre-match press conference as well, and we'll talk about some of his comments about Everton fans, Goodison Park, etc. But I feel like there is only really one place to start with the comments that Jose Mourinho made last night after Fenerbache's match with Manchester United. If you haven't seen the comments already, I will read them out for context. So here we go. This is what he said. He said, quote, "I think the best thing I have to do when I leave Fenerbahce is go to a club that doesn't play in Europe. So if any club in England at the bottom of the table needs to manage it in the next 2 years, I'm ready to go." Joe, clearly frustrated. I didn't see the match last night, but clearly a frustration at the UEFA officiating in last night's game. But what have you made of those comments, if anything, of what Mourinho said?
Yeah, not a huge amount, to be honest. I don't think it's particularly relevant to Everton. I think that it's easy to get drawn into that narrative. Look, Sean Dyche's contract is up at the end of the year. We've got new ownership that should be coming into the club. They have a relationship with Mourinho. It ended with his departure at Roma. And he's a manager with incredible pedigree, particularly in the Premier League. So, you can see why people have been, mooting him as a possible for, a statement signing for the Freakins potentially. I think context is important, and what he said in his comments was it's not in the next 2 years, it's in 2 years when his contract runs out at Fenerbahce. So that's 2026. Well, Everton have got another manager appointment to make in between that time. That might be to extend Sean Dyche's contract, or it might be to give someone else the keys to the throne at Goodison Park and Finch Farm, and of course, Bramley Moore. And I think Everton will be a very different club in 2 years' time. Hopefully they'll all be in Europe, so that'll disqualify him. Although obviously what he's saying. I mean, it might be that in 2 years' time, someone like Mourinho becomes a little bit more likely, because maybe the foundations have been laid and things have been stabilised, and Everton are no longer a side that is consistently scrapping around the bottom end of the Premier League table, but maybe it's the mid-table side that's looking to break into Europe, or the side that's occupying those bottom Europa Conference League places that wants to get higher in the league and, has more money and more freedom to spend it because of the end of things like PSR problems and the financial concerns. But, I think that I can understand why his comments have drawn a lot of attention this morning, particularly amongst the Everton fan base. But I don't think this is anything that's likely to happen at Everton, certainly not imminently.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to dwell too much on this. Obviously, it's a chatter, if you want to call that among Evertonians on Twitter this morning. And, he is specifically references clubs in England as well. So I think that's why, a lot of fans have jumped on that. I mean, I think we also as well need to be careful not to disrespect Sean Dyche. He is Everton's current manager right now and on a really good run, and it's something that we don't want it to be destabilised and anything like that. We've got a massive game against Fulham under the lights at Goodison Park tomorrow, and obviously we want to win. I don't think Sean Dyche will care one iota about what Jose Mourinho said, or whether it is in reference to Everton Football Club. I'm sure he's getting on with the job and the matter in hand, but I did think it was fairly interesting, and I do think although it is a clear frustration at the referees in last night's match, it is a clear hint that he obviously wants to come back to England, and there's no denying that Everton are going to have a brand new stadium, state-of-the-art brand new stadium at Bramley Moore, and I'm sure Jose Mourinho would, in his mind anyway, fit perfectly in the dugout of that. So I did think it was worth mentioning.
It'd be entertaining. There's no doubt about that. But I think
it'd be great for us as
journalists. Well, I mean, it'd be great for us from a journalistic perspective, but not following the Blues necessarily. I don't think. I mean, as good a manager as he is, much of his success, his success is getting increasingly longer ago. God, that sounds horrible sentence there. Like he's getting more and more distant, isn't it? His best years in the game. I think ultimately, he's someone that tends to leave clubs in a mess, having spent a lot of money. And I think if there's something that Everton really don't need as they try and enter a new era, it's more of the same.
No, yeah. I mean, final thoughts really from me. If Sean Dyche was to see out the remainder of his contract and it wasn't to be renewed, then obviously Everton do go looking for a new manager. I would be all for a young up-and-coming manager, someone who's tactically aware and someone who will be able to work with the director of football. I don't think Jose Mourinho fits in to that mantra. Like he just doesn't. But I do think that if a Jose Mourinho type manager was to come in, Jose Mourinho himself, that doesn't mean to say he couldn't be a success. I think his record speaks for itself. I think you're spot on that. His success is a little bit few and far between at this moment in time, but that doesn't make him a bad manager. So we will obviously keep this one in the back of our minds. I guess we'll call it that one, and we'll move on to more pressing matters and more Everton matters. I guess you were at Finch Farm yesterday for Sean Dyche's pre-Fulham match press conference, and we finally, other than I guess Tim Iraboom and maybe James Garner, we've got some positive injury news on the agenda. Yeah. I mean, things just started to move back towards Sean Dyche having close to a full strength side. Obviously, you still have the longer term issues like Armando Broja and Youssef Chermiti, but I think they're baked into our thinking now because we've known about them for some time. Iraboom and Garner look like they're probably both going to be long term as well. But beyond that, those players that are on the cusp of fitness were just missed out at Ipswich. The main one, obviously, being Jarrad Branthwaite. Well, he's been in training all week, and he is certainly in contention for Saturday's game. When I spoke to Sean Dyche after the Ipswich game, he was of the view that there was potential that Branthwaite could have played in that, but in the end, they decided to completely leave him out of the squad to give him another week to have that patience with him. Which, bearing in mind what happened at Portman Road, not just a win, but with a clean sheet, and Michael Keane, who would most likely be the player to drop out for Branthwaite, being the one that's playing so well as well as scoring his goal. It looks like he was vindicated in that decision. So Branthwaite will be the big selection issue for this weekend, but you also have Seamus Coleman and Nathan Patterson, both of whom made the bench last week, but didn't get onto the pitch. Again, we're in a happy situation where the player in front of them, Ashley Young, is someone that we probably wouldn't choose as the first choice right back in that squad necessarily. But he is on a good run of form. So there is competition, and that's incredibly valuable, especially in a squad where you don't have too much depth. And it feels like quite a big sea change to where we were, just a month ago or so, when, it was almost like, well, you had a situation where Everton were performing really poorly, but they didn't have the players in the squad available to even change things. And now you're in the opposite situation where all of a sudden the squad starts to look a little bit deeper, but the players that are in the first 11 are actually performing pretty well at the moment, so that's good. And then Jesper Lindstrom's the other one. He was out due to illness last week, and he's back now. And with that, I'm assuming that Beto, who was on the bench last week, but also had a bit of illness in the days before the game, I'm assuming that he will be fully available as well. Well, we'll come on to team selection. For me, the team pretty much picks itself. But let's talk Fulham. Before we do, by the way, I just want to apologise for anyone watching on YouTube. I'm really overexposed on my screen. I think I haven't set the lights properly to our our setup at this moment in time. So I'm going to have to keep an eye out for that. But yeah, if I'm really overexposed on YouTube, I can only apologise. Okay, Fulham then. Joe, Marco, first off, me and Tony Scott did a podcast on Wednesday to kind of look ahead to Fulham. So anyone who wants to listen or watch that can do so on the Royal Blue YouTube channel. But Marco Silva has been speaking about Everton. I think his press conference was this morning, was it? Because I've seen the quotes drop this morning. It may have been yesterday, I don't know. But he's had only really good words to say about his time at Everton fans, Goodison Park. For context, I'll just read some quotes out. So he says, "It was an honour to manage a club like Everton. I'm not the first or last for sure to say that, because when you were there, you can feel how big it is at the club and how massive the fan base are." Also on Goodison Park, he says, "It's an historic stadium, an old school one, and there's something special around the place. You can feel it." I mean, we don't want to be too nice to Marco Silva, Joe, because Fulham have quite clearly got the upper hand on us, certainly at Goodison Park over the past couple of years. But I guess it's nice that a former manager can say stuff like that and not feel, aggrieved as to, certain reasons why he was sacked or why it kind of didn't work out. Because I think a lot of fans would look back at that time under Marco Silva and say maybe he should have been given more of an opportunity to get things right.
Yeah, well, time's a big healer, isn't it? I think the fact that he's gone elsewhere and had success elsewhere obviously means that it's easier for him to look back on his departure from Goodison with a little bit more positivity. So, you'd expect him to say nice things about, obviously it's a huge club. It's still the biggest club that he's managed, with all respect to Fulham. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see, it'll be me and Chris will be at Goodison Park tomorrow during the post-match press conferences, and one of the things I'd be keen to ask him is just again, what Goodison means, because it'll probably be his last time there. So, whether that has any special resonance to him tomorrow, regardless of the result, or just away from the 90 minutes on the pitch. It's also probably easy for him to be positive because, like you mentioned, he's got such a good record over recent years. I think that Fulham and Marco Silva at Goodison Park seem to be Dyche's kryptonite because he hasn't worked out a way to beat them or even essentially draw with them. I think back to that April game a couple of years ago when just after Dyche had taken over at the end of the January, and I remember going into that game thinking, probably in that denial phase during that season, this was of course the Bournemouth final day of the season, thinking, this is the point where Everton will just get enough to pull away from the trouble. I think that we had Palace away, ended up drawing 0-0. And this Fulham game just felt like they were mid-table, had nothing to play for. A couple of games earlier, they'd had that massive blow-up at Old Trafford in the FA Cup where Mitrovic got a massive ban, so he wasn't there. Marco Silva had to sit in the stands. I was just sitting there at 3 o'clock, and I remember the sun was shining at 3 o'clock, sitting there at Goodison Park thinking this is one of those ones where Fulham got no skin in this game whatsoever. This surely is going to be the 3 points. And then he turned Everton over. Dwight McNeil got an equaliser midway through the first half, and he thought that might be the platform Everton needs to go on. But then second half, just remember, I think Ben Godfrey played right back on that day and just got absolutely done by Willian. And it was in that little run of games when, I think I spoke about it last week actually, when Nathan Patterson was fit but wasn't playing, and it felt like Dyche was doing absolutely everything he could to not play him, not for the first time. They played Holgate at right back against Palace and watched him get sent off. And I think the response was to play Godfrey at right back, go forward, which obviously he did a lot last season. But yeah, I remember coming away from that game being really disappointing. Obviously, there's the two last season. You had the opening game when, in fairness, Everton battered Fulham, but they stuck. There was that Bobby De Cordova-Reid goal late on. Bernd Leno was phenomenal in that game. Neil Maupay, one of a couple of missed glaring chances. And then obviously there was the Carabao Cup game against Fulham in December when we lost on penalties in December in the quarterfinals. Actually, I asked Sean Dyche about this yesterday. I said during the closed section of the press conference, obviously went through his record against Silva at Goodison Park and said, does that factor into your thinking? Have you identified any tactical reasons or anything like that? And Dyche, probably perhaps unexpectedly, just dismissed the whole concept of what happened in the past doesn't happen it doesn't dictate what happens in the future. And he said that when it comes to things like tactics, it's not as if there's a blueprint that Silva has used that has been successful every single time. He referred, and I guess he's probably got a degree of justification to this, referred to that opening game last season. He said in terms of tactics, it's not like Everton were being outdone in all 3 games. Absolutely. And I think we all agree with this. Obviously watched it. They were the better side by a mile on that day. It just came down to finishing. But I'm sure deep down he'd be quite pleased to break that duck tomorrow. And I think that, the good thing about that win at Portman Road last week is it just takes the pressure off this little run of games. Everton still need to pick up more games. I think when we've been speaking about this run of fixtures, Ipswich, Fulham, Southampton next week, and then West Ham, and I think it might be Brentford the other side of the international break. This is a game where Everton need to be picking up a good chunk of points to give themselves a bit of a buffer going into December. So the hard work isn't done from having won at Portman Road, but what it probably does do is it means that, look, Everton needs to be going in tomorrow thinking a win's possible, and a win certainly is possible, but a point probably isn't a terrible result if it just carries this run going, especially with Southampton the week. I think they can get 4 points from these next 2, and I really think Southampton looks a winnable game at the moment. If they can get 4 points from these next 2, I'd be really happy. Obviously, prefer 6, and that's what they should be aiming for. But tomorrow's a game where I think a point would represent a degree of progress, and also, especially if it came with a good performance, it would just mark that continuation of this little run of form, seeing Everton build into the season.
Yeah, I think you're right. The Ipswich win. I think if we was to have lost or even drawn against Ipswich, I think you'd be looking at this Fulham game as not a must win, but you'd be kind of thinking we need to win this. Now, like you say, we still want to win. We still want to get those 3 points. It's important to try and get back on track against Fulham, certainly at home. But a point probably wouldn't be the worst result. Obviously, depending on how teams below us get on as well. But I think, let's have the mindset of this positivity and let's go there for a win. Starting lineup then, Joe. I'll go first because I'll make it quite easy. I am gonna stick with the exact same team that won against Ipswich, but I'm obviously gonna I'm gonna take Michael Keane out and put Jared Brandthwaite in. So it's the exact same team apart from Michael Keane. Brandthwaite goes in. I would be open to the other combination of resting James Tarkowski should he really need the rest, and keeping Michael Keane in the team and bringing Jared Brandthwaite in. But I'm not privy to James Tarkowski's fitness and injury situation. Obviously, himself and Sean Dyche would know that. I'm sure James wouldn't appreciate me saying rest him for the game. I'm sure he'd play even if he had a leg hanging off. But I think with all the noise around James Tarkowski's fitness and injury issues of late, I think he might be getting back on track. But I wouldn't be opposed to having that defensive combination of Brandthwaite and Keane as well. But to start off with, it's Tarkowski and Brandthwaite to start off with me, and then the exact same team as Ipswich. So what is your Everton starting lineup?
Yeah, just on Tarkowski, I feel partly responsible for that noise. Somebody wrote a story about him and the issues that he's been fighting through ahead of the Ipswich game last week, and that conversation seems to have continued into this week quite a lot. And I think, we've all probably been able to see that Tarkowski hasn't quite been performing to the high levels that he's set recently, and obviously that's an explanation for it. But I do think that there's definitely belief that Everton were at the back end of those problems. The glute problem was a pre-season one, the back problem was an early season one, and whilst it led to them managing his training routine for a substantial portion of the season so far, I think that we're probably at a point where it should be okay now. You just look at the fact that Everton are playing one game a week at the minute, so there's a lot of time between games that helps. And when we've already had 2 international breaks, and we already have another one on the horizon. So I think each of those just gives someone like Tarkowski the opportunity just to keep kind of nursing him through everything. And hopefully now, let's say, off the back of the forward leg going into Ipswich, the hope was that he'd be at the back end of that. Brandthwaite's an interesting one in the sense that, kind of like where I was last week, if it's only match fitness that's stopping him from playing at the minute, then, well, there's only one way you're going to get match fitness now. And, he is significant. he's such an influence on that side that I think you put him in at this stage, and hopefully have him for the run of games going into the next international break. I think Keane has been Keane was very good last week. He was good against Newcastle. Obviously didn't play against Palace, but was decent against Leicester in the 1-1 draw when everyone just about hung on. Played through injury on that occasion. Obviously, the corollary of all this is, again, it was me who broke the last week that Keane had been playing through injury, and one of the sides conversations around that is what that means about where Jake O'Brien's up to, because that means that both Tarkowski and Keane have been playing through injury ahead of fit O'Brien. That might be a conversation for next week, perhaps. But yeah, I think that as well as Keane's done, I think ultimately you probably have to be a bit ruthless in this situation. We know what Branthwaite can bring to the side. It's no slight on Keane that Branthwaite looks a generational talent, and that Everton is stronger in that side. I think if he's close enough to be able to be involved, I think you bring him in and you say to Michael, look, like, brilliant what you've done recently, fantastic, and look. Sean Dyche said to him in the summer before he went away for his holiday, look, just because Tarkowski and Branthwaite have done so well, don't think there won't be opportunities for you. And he's had plenty of those already this season, and I think it's fair to say now he's at a point where he's probably taken them, and there's probably a little bit less anxiety around what would be to happen if he was to end up in the starting lineup again, because one of the first two ended up being injured or suspended. But this feels like it'd be a happy time just to kind of make the change back. And especially with Fulham are a very good side, it'll be a test. It'll be a test tomorrow. But with Southampton coming up next week, you think that'd be a slightly easier game. Yes, some people might say bring him in for that. But I just think that he represents a significant enough upturn. Say it's the relationship that he has with Tarkowski when they play along, the balance they have alongside each other, that I think Everton need to start exploring getting them back on the pitch together when they can. The other big question would be right back. Whereas I'd make the change at centre back, I'm probably with you again on the right back situation. Like, I think it would be nice to see Coleman back, and that it'd be nice to see Patterson get a run of the team. Just, I don't know if he's the solution, but like we said on that, who we'd be playing during the international break podcast. Like, I think a decision needs to be made on Patterson, and I'd just like to see him get a run of games to see if there is a player in there that perhaps saves Everton from one of the many tasks that they're going to have to do next summer. We won't know unless he gets played, but both of those are fragile. Like, we know their bodies have been vulnerable and susceptible to injury. It's not just bigger injuries, but also the little knocks and niggles that keep them, mean that they play maybe only 2 games in 3 when they are around. For the time being, if Ashley Young is playing well, which he has done the last few games, we know his fitness is exemplary. I don't really see any need to change that for the moment. And so I'm in a position where I agree with you. Obviously, with the caveat that I still think that Ndiaye and McNeil, I'd probably have Ndiaye in the central role, but look, McNeil picked up another assist.
He did, Joe. He did from a central position.
From a corner, wasn't it? Like, it wasn't necessarily from open play. Like, he filtered back into the middle. He was part of the melee of bodies on the edge of a box after a corner had been taken. But he slipped Michael Keane through incredibly well. As good as Michael Keane's goal was, McNeil still deserves credit I think he still deserves the assist for it. It's not like Ashley Young getting the assist for Dwight McNeil's first goal against Palace, where he puts it in from long range, and you're thinking he's had to do a lot of the work there. But yeah, like, I'm with you. A relatively settled side, and I think Branthwaite would be my only change.
I think I can sense that your acceptance already of McNeil just staying in the middle now. I can just feel it already.
Yeah, well, I've come to terms with it because it's something that I've spoken a lot to Sean Dyche about over the past few weeks, and there is almost a sense of defiance in Sean Dyche and his belief that it's not so much about Dwight McNeil in a central role, because when you ask him about Dwight McNeil in a central role, he's positive, but he will always lead on how much work Dwight McNeil needs to do defensively and how much he needs to improve himself defensively to play in this role, which largely is correlates with what I say. Like, that it's the balance of what that does to the side when you play him in that central role, which is the issue rather than what he can do in moments. But he's very, very defiant about this idea that people were telling him that Ndai could only play central, and he's playing him on the wing and he's having success there. And Dyche believes that he's like cracked the code essentially there. And it's like, look, I told you so. I told you he could be a winger. Again, I'm still questioning as to whether that's the best use of him. But look, Everton on a good run of form. Dyche has made the decision to that, where we criticise him or we look for issues when things are going wrong. When things are going right, I guess we have to give him the credit for it.
The Dwight McNeil code has been cracked. Sounds like a Hollywood feature film, Joe, if you ask me.
Well, as I say, it's Sean Dyche thinks the Illiman and Dye code has been cracked. That's what it is.
That probably sounds better, to be honest, doesn't it? That sounds a better title. Okay.
There is just to finish off on that point. Yeah, there is probably an interesting discussion to be had about what it says about, or what we try and read between the lines in relation to Dyche and the recruitment team at Everton, because everything that he says, everyone at Everton, I think it's fair to say that there's an assumption that Ndai would play in the central role. Dyche just put him on the wide, and if he's saying that everyone's been telling him he can't play out wide, then you wonder if he's trying to play him in a role that he wasn't necessarily brought in for, brought in to play the central role or identified as a target for the central role. And Dyche is going, no, I'm playing him on the left and I'm sticking with that. Because I think you can make a similar argument around Timo Robenham in the sense that Timo Robenham has had a good start to his Everton career and looks a talented player. But he very much, to me, doesn't look like he is, whilst he no doubt has a lot to learn, where he is at his strongest suggests to me that he'd be better kind of being the most advanced of a centre midfield free and not a deep line. And what we've seen repeatedly when he's been used is that he'll be part of that too, alongside, say, Idrissa Gueye at the start of the season, and it'd be a Doucouré that was pushed forward, and that doesn't seem right to me. And I'm not sure that Roman has the defensive attributes and awareness yet at this stage of his career to play that. And I think we saw that with some of the goals that Everton conceded when he was on the pitch in those positions. And again, it's a bit like there's almost a sense that Dyche is seeing something that everybody else isn't. Whether or not that's right or wrong, I suggest it's like in this case it's perhaps wrong, but I wonder if there is a little bit of a disconnect, or maybe just a stubbornness there, an intransigence, just that I know what's best. You give me the players, great. You identify talented players, but you're not telling me where to play it, that kind of thing.
No, it's a fair point. And on Tim Irabuman, me and Tony had about a 5 or 6 minute discussion on him on Wednesday's pod, and obviously we know he's injured now, which unfortunately is going to be long term, and he was definitely one of the standout players for the Blues in the first couple of games, but that didn't result in results for Everton. I'm not going to put everything down on him as to why we conceded so many goals. There was so many other factors, but I think, as discussed in previous podcasts with yourself, that a lot of the blame was put on the defence, and rightly or wrongly, that's obviously people's opinions, but I think the biggest factor that we discussed last week was that the midfield as well wasn't, balanced enough. There wasn't enough solidity in there, and I think now that we have that, and unfortunately for Tim, I think maybe him coming out the team, I think to the point he was maybe thrown in at the deep end. But I think there's definitely a player in there. He's clearly got talent. Hopefully he can get back to full fitness as soon as possible, and he can start making waves into that, Everton starting 11, because we're certainly going to need him. It's an only one game a week at the minute, where sometimes teams only play 2 or 3, but it's certainly a long season, and we're going to need as many players fit as possible. So fingers crossed he's back as soon as possible. Predictions then, Joe. I put a poll out on the Royal Blue YouTube community page yesterday, and so far it's still running, but 77% of Everton fans think Everton are going to win. 8% think Fulham are going to win, and 16% think it's going to be a draw. What do you think it's going to be?
Yeah, nice to see the positivity.
Absolutely.
Why? And I think it's interesting because I think Everton, if they win, will go level on points with Fulham.
Yeah.
I think Fulham are someone that are widely seen as having had a very good start to the season. And you think how bad things felt after the Bournemouth and the Aston Villa and then the Southampton results. If you just said that a month later that Everton could be on parity with Fulham, you'd have taken that, wouldn't you? I think they've got a good chance tomorrow. 2 unbeaten at Goodison, 4 unbeaten in the league. I think there's a genuine bit of confidence. You'll see the piece that I wrote from Finch Farm yesterday, where you can just feel the place just feels a happier place at the minute. Training ground, people, players just look like that couple of inches taller. Their backs that bit straighter. There's more chatter and laughter around the place in the corridors echoing through. Even if you can't see the people making it, it just feels a bit happier of a place. And with good reason too. Also think that Fulham have got a few players out tomorrow. Joachim Andersen got sent off last week, so he's out. So he's one of their big summer signings, a very good centre back. So that's good news for Everton. I think Timothy Castagne's out as well, so they've got another change to make at the back. So hopefully maybe those squad issues are going to work in Everton's favour. But they are a talented side, Fulham. We'll see Alex Iwobi back. Big fan of Alex Iwobi. And, Raul Jimenez hit the post last season, in that opening game of the season. He's hitting a little bit of form. They have Pereira. They have a few talented players that could cause Everton problems. But yeah, I'll go for a win. I'm hopeful. I mean, it'd be nice just to keep up the positivity, wouldn't it?
Speaking to people, everyone is quite positive, which is a bit of a shock, really. Even I know we've gone on a 4-game unbeaten run, but I think even though performances might not quite have been there, I think obviously the best performance this season has been against Bournemouth, and we ended up losing that game, which is just still incredible to me. I don't think I'm ever going to get over that, but obviously we move on, and the players and the managers definitely moved on, and we have shown a bit of backbone, to be honest. I think obviously players coming back from injury has helped, and certain players up in the game and form has definitely improved, etc. So, and we did have a relatively, people say, well, should have been an easy start, but it was a tough start. Brighton was never going to be an easy game, and Villa and Tottenham are, the top 7 teams. So it was always going to be tough. Just think, can you imagine if we'd have got the 3 points against Bournemouth and continued on with the results that we had now? We'd probably feel like we were flying, to be honest. I don't think there'd be any fear of relegation on the back of that run. But I think before Palace, I think I suggested that we should at least get 11 points. I'm just trying to work it out now. So I said 3 against Palace, 1, then it would have been 7, 10. So from Palace, I said we need at least 11 points, and we're actually on course for that. So we beat Palace, we drew with Newcastle, we obviously got the win against Ipswich, so that has give us 7 points, and a win against Fulham will give us 10. So yeah, I think I'm going for a win as well. I don't know the scoreline. It's a tough one. I'll go 2-1. It'd be disappointing to concede because I think we've looked really solid defensively, and obviously with Jada, if he was to come back in the team, you'd always want a clean sheet. So, but I think Fulham are a threat going forward. They're definitely going to be on a different level to Ipswich. I think people always use becomes a bit of a cliche now, don't change your winning team. But I think in this case, you would need to look at the differences and the disparity of levels between Ipswich and Fulham, and think that Fulham are going to be a different proposition, and we obviously need Branthwaite back in the team. So it's going to be a tough game. We need to put to bed this Fulham hoodoo. It's going to be Goodison Park under the lights tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure you are as well.
Yeah, no, I am looking forward to it tomorrow. So keep our fingers crossed. 2-0, I think I'll keep a clean sheet. I was right last week. Fingers crossed I can be right this week. And as I say, just knowing, look, a lot can happen at Southampton between now and 8 days' time when Everton go there. And it certainly feels that Russell Martin is a manager under pressure. But having that, just like one of the hardest things about the Bournemouth collapse, I think, was knowing the fortnight after the international break, spend that fortnight going, we've got Villa next. So it's almost like things probably aren't going to get easier with this one. It's like, having Southampton afterwards, which again, I think, like Ipswich, just falls into that category of fixture, which is just Sean Dyche at his strongest as a manager. Those games you just need those games, just picking up them games you just need to keep winning just to kind of keep your head above water. That's what his specialism is. And Southampton look like the type of side that he could probably, design another victory against. So it just, as I say, whereas you would always want 3 points from this fixture, bearing in mind the run of form that Everton have had going into it and bearing in mind the game that's to come, without trying to get complacent, I do think that, a draw wouldn't be the worst. But hopefully, obviously, they go and get 3.
Okay, well, I'm there tomorrow in the Lower Gladys, and you and Chris are going to be there covering the game. So obviously, keep an eye out for Chris and Joe's content on the Liverpool Echo website, and keep an eye out for our post-match videos on the Royal Blue YouTube channel. And fingers crossed, Everton come away with a win, and we can all enjoy our Saturday and on into Sunday as well. Any final thoughts, Joe, before we finish?
No, just how nice it'd be the prospect of another nice week going into Southampton. It's been a much nicer week this week, hasn't it, off the back of the Ipswich one. So yeah, no, just follow all our coverage. We have plenty on the website tomorrow morning going into the game, and yeah, fingers crossed that we're talking in happy tones on Monday. I hope everyone has a great weekend.
Absolutely. Okay, well, please remember to give us a like and hit the subscribe button. Support the channel. It's always greatly appreciated. I've been Ian Croll, joined by Joe Thomas, and this has been the Royal Blue Podcast.
The Royal Blue Podcast from the Liverpool Echo.